Come on, I know I've gotten this to work before. Hey, text. What am I doing wrong here? Yeah, show me. Now then. Okay, that's what it is. Thank you. Let's try this again. Ah, that's much better. Much more fitting for today's comic. Let's begin. Hello and welcome to the Punchline. I'm your comic strip critic, and today's episode is really something unique. And I know I'd like to say that about pretty much all the comics I discuss on the show these days, ranging from Zippy the Pinhead's surrealism, to Luann's extensive character arcs, to Order of the Sixth sense of epic fantasy, to the sense of style and grace in the artwork of Heavenly Nostrils. Oh my gosh, I love this comic so much. Go read it. But this really is something entirely different altogether. It's a black and white stick figure comic with less detail and yet more detail than the Order of the Stick. It's a storyline from a cartoonist who doesn't usually utilize storylines, and what it is on a fundamental level is a contradiction. It's a minimalist epic. Let's talk about XKCD. XKCD, spelled and pronounced XKCD, if you try to actually pronounce it, I think you'll wind up summoning Great Cthulhu, is one of the most popular webcomics in existence. The man behind the madness is Randall Munroe, an honest-to-God rocket scientist. Well, honest-to-God NASA roboticist. You might know him from one of his upcoming projects. He started XKCD in 2005, and the comic updates every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A quick word of warning to those of you interested in checking the comic out, especially since I make sure to keep the Punchline family-friendly all the time. XKCD does occasionally utilize strong language and adult humor in its comics. That doesn't mean that the comic is bad. It just means that it's meant for a certain audience. This storyline, however, is 100% family-friendly. Feel free to share this one with Grandma. So what is this storyline that we're talking about today? It's time. No, the story is time. No, the actual name of the storyline as presented by the comic is called Time. Just show time already. Oh my god. On March 15th, 2013, this was the XKCD comic that appeared. That's it. Just two people sitting on a beach. A half hour later, though, they moved. And every half hour, they kept moving a little more. Eventually, the pair got up and built the sandcastle. They then added a bit more to the sandcastle, and it grew into the mother of all sandcastles to have ever been built. Yeah, even these guys don't manage to impress me anymore. Okay, you might. But sharp-eyed readers noticed something changing as the comic progressed. The sea is rising. The main characters noticed it as well, and they start wondering why that's happening. So they decide to pack up and head on off to find out what exactly is causing this phenomenon. In other words... I'm going on an adventure! Well, kind of. There's less dungeons and dragons and misty mountains cold and more, well, less. The girl and guy, whose identities are never clarified for the record, just keep walking. Occasionally something interesting will happen, but there are no real jokes, no deep conversations around a campfire, no kung fu action sequences where River Tam beats up everyone. They just keep on walking. Every so often a small conversation happens, or they see some wildlife doing what they do best, but that's really it. It's just a quiet trip between these two people who are very comfortable spending long periods of silence with each other. I know that I go crazy after a while. It's like the brown bunny of comics. Perhaps equally interesting as the comic itself, though, was the community's reaction to the comic. They saw the various plants and animals and figured that they could eventually narrow down and locate the comic setting, eventually pinpointing it to be set in the basin of the Mediterranean Sea. And given what we've seen of the storyline so far, where the most advanced thing to exist is a sandcastle and there's no visible cities or technologies around, these people don't have cars or bikes or motorcycles or anything, time is probably set in an ancient civilization. No, they figured that part out too. At one point in the story, the two wanderers settle down for the night, and we get to see the stars pass by. The scientifically accurate stars. The scientifically accurate stars that were charted with the help of a leading astronomer, Phil Plait. And of course, the fans of XKCD used all the data from these trips to determine that the storyline is set 11,000 years in the future after the fall of civilization. Among other things, they noticed a missing star from the constellation Scorpius and the wobble of Earth's rotational axis from where it is now.
But that could just be orbital wobble.
That actually almost works in this case. The point is, the fans of XKCD are insane. Seriously, these guys spent their time researching and analyzing the flora and fauna and stars in the comic to determine the geographical region and time where this took place. Even knowing the obsessive and meticulous nature of the internet, I just think that's amazing. I'm not sure whether I'm more impressed by the fans actually figuring all this out so quickly, or by Randall Munroe's insane and obsessive attention to detail. Either way, it's hugely impressive. Back to the two wanderers, though. After so much traveling, they eventually find other people. It really is something that seems huge and monumental after spending so much time alone in the rest of the comic. And what do they have to say to our two heroes? Holobo. Huh. Okay. Huh. Oh, and by the way, the fictional language that's on display here, created with the help of an authentic linguist, and the internet has yet to translate it, so go nuts, guys. Figure it out. The new people, dubbed Beanies by the XKCD community, take the Wanderers to, well, I gotta say it.
Take me to your leader.
And the Beanie leader can actually understand the Wanderers. Somewhat. I love the way that the Beanie leader's shaky grasp of English is portrayed, with all these smudges and blotches and double words here. It's a really cool way to visually show an oral concept. It's actually one of my favorite parts about the entire comic. It's super creative and unique. And 3/4 of the way into the storyline, we get the answer we were looking for. Yes, the sea is rising. At a rapid rate. At some point, the Mediterranean Sea was cut off from the Atlantic Ocean and largely evaporated. But now, the Atlantic is coming back. And it'll eventually cover up everything in every place that we've ever seen in the comic. Our two wanderers plan on running back and saving their friends and their family and their neighbors, but then the Beanie leader says they can't. There isn't enough time to get back and save them before the sea swallows them up. If the wanderers go back, they'll die. It's a really powerful moment. One moment, your family, your friends, your home, everything that you've ever taken for granted, everything that you presume is still going to be there when you get back, it's gone. No chance to say goodbye, no heartfelt hugs, no kisses. One moment it's there, and the next, you're told you can't ever see it again. What do you do in that scenario? Well, if you're the Wanderers, you ignore all that advice and all those warnings and run back home anyway. On the way back, we passed by nearly all of the locations we saw on the way to the Beanie people. All of the towers, trees, huts, hills, mountains, we blazed by them in record time. And then we reached the sea. We reached the sea far sooner than we should be. The Wanderers forded the rising waters, and in a miraculous turn, meet up with their village and manage to tell everyone what's going on. If there is a flaw to this comic, this would be it here. The people on display here are people that we're really supposed to be invested in, people we're supposed to care about, but since we've never met them, it is kind of hard to care for them. We don't know who they are. We don't know what connection the Wanderers really have to them. We've never seen them interact in any way, so what's our emotional stake in this? But I will say that due to XKCD's very simple art style, the friends and family of the Wanderers are abstract enough that they can stand in for anybody you care about, so I suppose it still works in the end. In a very cool move, one of the villagers constructs a floating barge from the giant sandcastle from the very beginning of the story. Everyone piles on the barge and sails off, meeting up with another barge and surviving the oncoming flood. They all sleep through the night, and in a nice little callback to the start of the comic, the two wanderers wake up early and build a tiny little sandcastle. It's a great way to show us of all that's happened and how far we've come since we've started this comic. Literally, how far we've come. All of the animals and trees and plants and places we've been to, and now it's all gone. The old world has washed away, and as the barge washes onto a new shore and a new land to explore, XKCD's epic comes to an end. So, that's time. And I will admit that it's a far cry from most of the usual stuff that you'll find in XKCD's 1,400 comic strong archive, but it's the one comic that I remember the most out of any of them that exist. And it's one of the quietest comics I've ever seen. So many panels in this are completely silent. Many of them are just empty landscapes, and I really like the quiet nature of the whole thing. It's a wild change of pace from the constant dialogue and bright colors of practically every other comic out there. And it's not just the look and dialogue that's so incredibly different, it's also the overall mood. Most other comics, both good and bad, are very, well, blunt in their purpose. This comic is obviously meant to make you laugh. This comic is obviously meant to make you cry. This comic is obviously meant to make you hate this politician. But with time, it's not meant to invoke any specific mood. It's a silent, introspective, contemplative journey. And it really is more about the journey than it is about the destination. I do hope that eventually this comic is published in a book form, because I would love to go out and buy it and support Randall Munroe some in whatever way I can. But for now, the entire comic is still available to read online in its entirety for free, so I recommend that you go check it out. I'm your comic ship critic, and I read the funny pages and search the web in search of comics and storylines like XKCD's Time. Now, if you'll excuse me, we have to go do a little wanting of our own. Let's go exploring, buddy.